I would see spirits all the time as a child, and I personally saw Jesus. I asked him if he was the Messiah, and he replied to me that
Today, we are talking with intuitive psychic Mia Simone. Mia founded her company, Prescience Life, in 2014 after many years of extensive training in different healing modalities, where she personally studied under several internationally known psychics. She attends numerous conferences regularly, such as the Science and Non-Duality Conference, Institute of Noetic Sciences, and the Conscious Research Laboratory to further expand her abilities and understanding of the healing arts. Mia now offers individual sessions as an intuitive reader, as well as training for those who might be interested in learning more about their own intuitive abilities. We are looking forward to getting to know her today. So Mia, we want to welcome you to the show. Thank you so much for being here.
Good morning, ladies. Thank you so much for having me as well. I'm very grateful to be here today.
So Mia, can you start by sharing with us when you knew you had psychic abilities and how you first got started with reading people?
Ever since I was a young child, I've always known that I've had the ability to see into the future and, predict things, have feelings about certain people. I actually feel that we're each individually born with certain propensities toward being more intellectual or more intuitive. And I personally died for a few minutes as a baby while I was still at the hospital. And I do remember that. I personally saw Jesus. It's really hard for me to talk about this without getting very emotional, but I asked him if he was the Messiah, and he replied to me that he was appearing to me in that way because he didn't want to frighten me. As a child, there were a lot of fundamental Biblist preachers living in our neighborhood, and they were telling me I was possessed by the devil and things like that. And I became very fearful and just started to ignore what I was seeing. And so in terms of when I started reading, it wasn't until many, many years later that I had an interest in all things energy. I started taking classes, and that eventually became me doing intuitive readings. It was a very difficult period for me and took some time to get over that feeling that this is something that is not of a God. I don't have any specific beliefs. I believe there's a universal consciousness, but it's a very difficult time. And looking back at that now, I think that it's really a shame I wasn't encouraged more to be intuitive and to use those abilities, because all of us have them, particularly as children, and we tend to kind of put them away, and they're written off as imaginary friends or our imagination making things up. And so as an adult, I slowly transitioned out of corporate life and became an intuitive reader, which was a very difficult transition.
That must have been very hurtful. Who were the people that were calling you or saying that you were possessed by the devil?
Yeah, primarily there was a married couple who had a family across the street who used to teach weekly Bible lessons, and they would rope all the children in by making cookies and things like that. And they basically said that those weren't gifts, they were instruments of the devil. And it really had an impression on me. It really frightened me. This was a time prior to the internet being so popular, and you couldn't just go Google something. It was brainwashing. It took a long, long time to let that go. And also because I would see spirits all the time as a child. And my father always used to tell me it's the live ones you have to worry about, not the dead ones. I'll never forget that. So I became more and more interested in it and realized that we all have these intuitive, I don't necessarily like calling them gifts, because I feel like we're naturally born with them as a survival instinct. And I've worked so hard to develop my intuition personally. And so I feel like I've worked very hard at it, and that it's not necessarily a gift. It's something I valued and wanted to educate myself on because I saw the value in it.
What types of readings do you offer?
My primary focus is intuitive readings for life, helping people with relationship situations, career, things like that. I'm a sole believer in practicing our talents because we don't need more mediocrity in this world. So I want to be an expert in one thing. And I love talking about problems. I care about people and very interested in just holding a space for people, if nothing else. So that's my primary focus, and also creating one-on-one intuitive packages for people to teach them how they can actually develop skills that are going to be very useful to them.
What's the difference between a psychic and a medium?
Well, mediums tend to focus on spirits who have crossed over, and there's a reason why I don't focus on that, because every now and again a spirit will come into a reading and it's something very, very specific message. And I've not had the experience of being able to feel like I have a direct dial to the dead and call on any spirit at any moment. That's just not my experience. So yeah, mediums just focus primarily on those who have passed and spirits, where I focus on looking at the energy of life and the future.
When you're working with your clients, Mia, where does this information come from? How do you get the information to connect with that person?
I believe that mathematics is the language of the gods. It's not something that we're creating, it's something we're discovering. And so there's frequencies, vibrations, wavelengths, and just like a cell signal that goes and pings off of a satellite, our hearts and minds emit electricity. So that's what I'm tapping into, essentially. It's something that is very, very subtle, that has an energy to it. You can actually take and create a trajectory into someone's future to look at possibilities and probabilities. And so it's really just asking, what frequency are they on? Like, what energetic, code? It's just like having a phone number. If you look at it in that way, like if you're on a cell phone, you tap in a number, those turn into frequencies that will dial someone's phone. And it's basically essentially the same idea.
Do you need to ever protect yourself from negative influences?
I do. In my intuitive coaching classes, I teach people how to put up energetic boundaries.
And Mia, I understand that you have studied the science behind energy. Can you share a little bit more around your understanding of energy and how you interact with that energy when you're working with your clients?
Well, I typically ask my clients to say their name. The first name is the most important, and I always ask them what they'd like to talk about. I used to do readings where I would just tell them what I see, and I found that by asking questions, it gets to the point and they're much more productive. And then I go from there. And it's interesting because, in all honesty, each client is so different. I feel like some clients are extremely easy to read and you can see mental image pictures, and other ones you really have to break it down and ask a lot of questions, and not asking out loud, but internally, silently, to make sure everything's congruent. And it just depends on the client, really, in terms of that. And being able to break down their cycles. Some people are much more predictable than others. So it does depend on their habits and how open they are, and as to, just what comes up. And, sometimes spirits do come in and they have a message and the reading goes in an entirely different direction, or something perhaps from the past. And that's also another reason to ask questions, because I feel like it's easier to kind of tap into what do they really need from the reading, because it may be something that they're not able to articulate. And so, yeah, I try to break down the cycles and the impressions that I get, things like that. It's really difficult to not allow the, our mind to kind of hijack things, and always important to our brain is able to identify things within 6 seconds. We're designed that way. So I always know that, going to the first 6 seconds and creating a trajectory from there with any client is the most important thing.
And I'm just curious, if you give them a reading and you give them some advice, does that actually also affect the outcome? If you give them that reading and that information, do they take that in, and then that may actually change what potentially could have happened?
Absolutely. Predicting the future is becoming more and more difficult simply because we have so many options and cell phones, and people now consider text messages as having an actual conversation with people. And, decisions are made in seconds, and there's so many. So all of that definitely affects people. And I find that, I have people calling me saying that the prediction didn't come true, or not often, but I ask them, did you try my suggestions? And more often than not, they didn't. And that is also a lot of the way I help people, is I can offer them insight about good decision making and, putting them on a good positive trajectory. But we are far more integral to our lives than we like to think.
Mm-hmm. And actually, along those lines, I believe you identify as an empath. I actually do as well. But for anyone that is listening, could you explain what that is?
Well, the word empath literally means to be in someone else's moccasins. That's the literal definition. And it's interesting because, for example, I would be having lunch with someone and hear, I don't want to be friends with this person anymore. And then the friendship would break up. That person would distance themselves from me. And I would wonder, but I wasn't thinking that. And then I realized, like, literally, I would be hearing I as in them thinking that. And so it is oftentimes like that, where we have the inability to distinguish the difference between our thoughts and emotions versus someone else's, and understanding the difference. But being an empath can be really tricky in that way, and taking on other people's information. And there is a thing called mirror neurons that, we start to mirror others. And, like, for example, yawning. When someone walks into a room and, you could be wide awake, they yawn, and you may yawn and matching their energy. And it's as simple as that, basically.
You just said the word. And
no.
Tracy's just testing it out to see if it works.
Oh my goodness. No, you said the word, yes, and I thought of it and then works. I yawned. That's how powerful you are.
When I go to do a reading, and I have to prepare beforehand, and I will put myself into a trance so that I'm in the center of my head. And oftentimes I close my eyes so I can keep a space of neutrality. And, I know myself well enough to know what would be my interpretation, say as a friend or a person, versus looking at the energy through a space of neutrality.
Is there a common challenge for most people that come to see you?
I think that just a lot of confusion and not being able to access their own information in a helpful way, I would say.
It almost sounds like therapy.
Some people may look at it in that way, and I suppose some people do, or view it as a very therapeutic experience. Yeah, and it depends. To me, when I feel like I've done a really good reading, I feel like I've shifted the energy and given them information to be able to make good, solid decisions.
Can you share with us an interesting story about a client that you've worked with?
One of my favorite stories is, I love, if they're good predictions, I love hearing, like, you're going to meet your love, or, the stories around that. And this was probably 15 years ago. Someone had come in to me, and I described a man she was going to be meeting. And there was a particular online website she was looking through, and she saw that individual there. And, just on the advertisement, they were using real people for advertisements. And so she joined because she's like, this is the man. And he fit every single thing that I had detailed. And she sent him a message and he didn't respond. But meanwhile, someone else had contacted her. And then, she called me and she was telling me this. And I said, so I was like completely wrong. And she said, no, you don't understand what I'm telling you. It was right because I joined the site because you described this man so detailed and so well. I never would have joined that site. And the person that contacted me while I was waiting for, the first man to contact me ended up being her husband. And now they've been married all this time. They've had children and they couldn't be happier. And she never would have signed up for that website had I not told her. So I realize, and I tell people this, that, it sometimes comes as, something that is the gateway or the door to what they're looking for. Which made me really happy. I'm so happy she shared that story because I realize now I may see something that doesn't entirely make sense, but later on it does. And one that actually didn't make me laugh, but I was fearful that one of my clients was going to be kidnapped by her father. And it was very frightening because I kept seeing, pictures of her and passports. And 2 years later, she discovered that during the visit, I was so concerned about her father had taken her identity and taken out credit cards and things on it. And so I realized that I was only seeing, like driver's license and passport, that it like was her identity and not literally her. But just in ways that it's interesting because we may misinterpret. However, there's, actually something there.
Kidnapping her identity. You were right on the money.
Exactly. Yes. So I always pay attention to things like that, even if they don't necessarily add up. And, sometimes I will get the answer in my sleep and I just contact someone and let them know. Personally, I do. I don't make them book a reading or anything.
So Mia, are you always reading people? Like when you're interacting with people just in your everyday life, you're going about your business, going to the grocery store, standing in line at the bank, do you have images that are coming to you, or is there information that you're receiving just in conversation with people, or do you have to actually put yourself into a specific state in order to receive information?
It's interesting. I always receive information. However, during a reading, I definitely want to put myself in a trance. So I'm holding that space of neutrality, but I think it's impossible to completely shut down information that I'm receiving. I try to keep the energetic boundaries up, but I don't think there's ever a way to completely shut everything out. I call it having a very porous aura. And also, to be fair, I'm fascinated with people. I love people watching and learning. And I find that if I go to the grocery store or something, people I never tell people what I do, but they want to share their whole life story with me. And I love hearing about people's life stories and being out and about. I feel like those are such perfect relationships because it was perfect for a couple minutes and a lot of very heartfelt feelings exchanged and just being real, and the relationship stays perfect forever. So I love picking up information like that. And if I feel someone's going through a difficult time or something, just being able to hold a space and comfort them or offer them compassion, and without maybe necessarily stating, what I see the issue to be. But there's always information everywhere.
Yeah, you mentioned earlier that everybody has a base psychic ability. And the way I see that is intuition. When you have an intuition about something, is that like kind of what you were talking about?
Well, yes, because if you look at us as humans and how we're designed, it really is a survival skill from the caveman days. We had to understand, like, if there was a tiger that was going to pursue us, or, people would get um, intuitive feelings about those things and the fight or flight and have to run, or like if there's poisonous berries, things like that. And really, we're just elaborating on that in modern times, but all of us are born to a certain degree, with intuitive.
What can someone do to increase their own psychic awareness or abilities?
Well, going back to knowing ourselves and being able to distinguish the difference between an intuitive feeling versus generalized anxiety or worrying or fear. I always say 11 minutes a day just of meditation or closing our eyes and thinking about getting in the center of our head. There's a pineal gland or pineal gland, and then the pituitary gland is right here. The pineal gland's in the center of our head, and if you can envision being in those spaces, that's the most intuitive center, and it also creates a space of neutrality, so it makes it so much easier to kind of to sense energy and feel it. And just practicing, like, being in those spaces and being quiet and listening. Also observing people's actions. And one of the first things I do when I'm teaching intuitive classes, tell people to keep an intuitive diary of only things that they suspect are intuitive, whether it's a dream or a feeling. You can turn on the radio and a song that's playing kind of will tell you about the future. It's like prognostication, which translates to literally knowing something about the future. And those are all ways that we can increase our intuition. And one of the reasons to keep a diary is because we oftentimes gaslight ourselves or dispute. Well, maybe I didn't really think that or say that, but if you have a diary and it's written down, then you can go back and try to recall, like, what was that feeling that distinguished it from anxiety or an intuitive feeling. And sometimes it's something of no consequence, and a lot of times it's not.
Yeah, it's just practice and awareness, right? We just have to put our awareness on it, and also practice to get better at it. So,
Yeah, and people have different skills. A lot of people think that an empath isn't very powerful, but empaths really can tell so much more, like having the gift of prognostication and being able to literally predict. And prognostication is an old term for, like, literally predicting the future that's very short term, right? Which is very, very helpful in today's world. But the more you use these skills, it just starts to grow and manifest and, like, grow exponentially faster than we might think. But basically 11 minutes a day dedicated to any of those things, meditating. I tell people, focus whatever you're good at. If you're an empath, if you channel, spirits or what have you, focus on what you're really good at and increase those talents. And there are a lot of very good unintended consequences that come about from just practicing whatever your, best skill is.
well, this has been really great. Can you leave us with a final message, just some words of wisdom?
People are losing themselves and really questioning themselves. And I find you know, a lot of it does have to do with social media and thinking our lives should be a certain way. And it's very important for all of us to sit down and understand, what are our ethical values and whatever those are, and our core values. What is our baseline temperament, and, like, really, really work with that, because it's so crucial to understanding, intuition and how to navigate your life and to trust yourself, because in a way you kind of make yourself like, maybe bulletproof isn't a good term, but like energetically kind of bulletproof, because it makes it a lot more difficult for, people to get in there and like manipulate us in some ways. And I think just paying attention to those things and allowing that to grow, it's really, really important no matter what you believe.
I think those are great words to end on. For anyone listening, Mia offers readings as well as training, which you can find on her website. And we will include those links in the description of the video so people can reach out to you. Just want to thank you so much for your time today, Mia. It has been great learning more about energy, how we can use it to benefit ourselves. And we just appreciate you sharing about not your gifts, but your abilities. So thank you for sharing with us. And we just want to say thank you. Thank you so much. We really appreciate your time.
Thank you so much for having me. I'm so grateful for you.
Hi, Mia.